Hey everyone, welcome back. Recently, I went to visit my parents for Easter and a few other things, and that required me to step away from the channel. But of course, the second I did that, a lot of really important things happened. We had the mass shooting in Nashville, which was then followed up by the protests, which was then followed up by the expulsion of two African American representatives from the state legislature, who were then immediately reinstated. We also had a federal judge order a Texas library to restore banned books to the shelves, which was then followed by a bunch of state and local Republicans across the country attempting to defund local libraries. We also saw more legislation passed that was anti-LGBTQ, specifically anti-trans across the country. We also saw more abortion measures. Ron DeSantis signed a 6-week ban, as well as there was the federal ruling regarding the drug mifepristone, which is still in murky water, so we'll see how that plays out. And we also saw calls from Republicans to defund the police, specifically the Department of Justice, in the wake of ongoing investigations and indictments against former President Donald Trump. Now, I of course wanted to talk about all of these things, and if there's anything you want to hear my specific take on, let me know in the comments. But instead, in this video, I wanted to address the overarching theme that pervades all of these news stories. And it's that at this point, it just seems that Republicans really don't care anymore. Now, when I say that Republicans don't care anymore, I mean two things. Number one, they don't actually care about proposing solutions to real issues. And when they do propose new policy, it's obvious that they don't care what the general electorate thinks, as those policies are widely unpopular and are often detrimental to the constituents that they're supposed to be representing. Take, for example, the issue in Nashville. After the tragic shooting there, many students came out and protested and were understandably frustrated that they are facing the constant threat of school shootings and asked their state legislature to do something about it. But instead of even trying to look at solutions, the governor came out and said, well, there's nothing we can do to prevent school shootings, and the state legislature expelled 2 members who were African American for joining in their protest and supporting the constituents that they were there to represent. And not only does that show that they really don't care about the next generation of voters, which is going to be a problem for them in the future, they also decided that they didn't care about looking racist because they expelled the 2 African American members, but not the white member. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who voted did it because of race, but I'm just saying that that's how it looks, and it's not a good look. Now, I understand that gun violence in America is a complicated subject, and I did a previous video where I talked about the fact that we need to do a lot more research and really begin to understand this problem. So, yeah, I'm not necessarily blaming them for not coming up with a solution like that, but when it comes to simpler things like libraries, the answer is pretty simple. Libraries provide a lot of benefit to the community. Having a place where you can go and exist, check out a book, check out music, check out movies, and not have to pay for any services and just have that there for the community is amazing. It's a wonderful resource. I made a lot of use of my local library when I was growing up. And additionally, it's a really important place for some people to gain access to the internet. When I was growing up, there were people I went to school with who did not have a computer at home, and so to do papers for school, or to get on the internet to just talk to people, go on Facebook, these little things that we might take for granted, they had to go to the library. So when states like Missouri are saying, yeah, we're going to eliminate all funding for libraries because we think that they're stocking woke books or whatever, what they're really saying is, we don't care if our constituents don't have access to free books for either education or leisure, or music, or movies, or the internet, or any of the other services that your local library might provide. Moving on, obviously we have seen a lot more attacks on LGBTQ individuals, specifically the trans community, and bills passed in many states trying to restrict their rights to exist in public life. I did a much longer video on this, but to sum up that video, it's all very fascist. And it goes to show that the Republican Party doesn't really care about individual rights or freedoms when those rights and freedoms belong to a group that they want to marginalize and other. They're fine when it's the right to freedom of speech or freedom of dress or any of the other freedoms that they want for their base. But if it's those other people, no, their rights don't actually matter. We don't really care about protecting every individual's freedoms. This lack of care about individual rights is also seen in the GOP's continuing war against abortion. We saw Florida enact a 6-week ban. We saw a federal judge attempt to revoke the FDA's approval of mifepristone, despite the fact that it had been approved for 20 years, and the doctrine of latches certainly should have applied, but that's another story. But what Republicans are saying, whenever they try to restrict abortion even further and take that choice away from women, they're not only saying that they don't care about a woman's freedom to choose what to do with their bodies, they're also saying that they don't care if women in their state live or die. As by restricting access to abortion, especially when it comes to medically necessary abortions to protect the life of the mother, doctors are saying that these laws are so vague that they're coming into points where their Hippocratic Oath is conflicting with state law, and they're finding it very difficult to practice medicine, to the point where they're leaving states that have these abortion restrictions. In Idaho, we saw entire maternity wards close as doctors said, we can't work here because we're risking either breaking our professional ethics code or breaking the law. And we don't want to have to make these decisions, so we're out. And where there's not maternity care, especially when there might be complicated births involved, we're going to see more and more women die in childbirth. But when Republicans say, no, we're going to go ahead and restrict abortion because we believe it's morally wrong, and we're going to impose our morality on you despite the fact that you don't believe what we believe, they're saying that we don't care about your freedom, and we don't care if you live or if you die. Lastly, we have Republicans' repeated calls to defund the DOJ over their investigation of former President Donald Trump. Now, obviously this shows that Republicans really don't care about law and order, because if they did, they would more likely be saying something along the lines of, well, in the U.S. justice system, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty, no indictments have been filed, and we are sure that the Justice Department investigation will clear the former president of all wrongdoing, and should they proceed with an unwarranted indictment, a jury will come to the proper conclusion that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying, we're going to take all of this money away from the Department of Justice, and specifically the FBI, so that they can't investigate him anymore. So we'll never know if he did anything wrong, and if we never find out, then he must not have done anything wrong. They're essentially saying that we don't care if the laws actually apply to everyone, as long as our guy doesn't end up in jail. And not only that, when you look at the amount of money they're talking about stripping out of the FBI, that's not just the money that would go to the special counsel. It's also money that would go to training, to tracking down sexual predators, arms traffickers, drug dealers, and all the other criminals that the Department of Justice investigates and prosecutes on a regular basis. So, when they're out there attacking the Department of Justice and saying that it's been weaponized, what Republicans are really telling you is that they don't care if the law applies equally, and when they want to take funding away from the Department of Justice, they're saying that they don't really care if laws get enforced at all. So yeah, it doesn't seem like Republicans care very much anymore. When facing the issues that are actually important to the nation, they don't have any real solutions. And the solutions that they are proposing are for problems that don't really exist. But if we look at all the things that I discussed in this video, as well as the many things that I didn't but could have, there are two things that Republicans do seem to care about. Number one is keeping their base angry and engaged, so that when it comes to primary season, elected Republicans don't lose their seat to a primary challenger who's more extreme than they are. And number two, they care about appeasing their donors, be it the small dollar donor who's only giving $10, $20, or the donor who can contribute millions. Because at the end of the day, Republicans want to keep profiting from these people as they implement policies that are not only unpopular, but will have long-term negative effects for the constituents that they're supposed to represent. And when you look at that, it reminds me of the Maya Angelou quote. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. And so as we see Republicans continue down this path, I think it's pretty obvious that we should believe that they don't really care anymore. Think about it.